story, Ray.
Your story needs more conflict. The other common saying we hear is that drama is conflict, and both are often true. Kind of. Let's get into it. When it comes to dramatic writing, one of the most common criticisms newer writers get is that their story lacks conflict. It's a note that's often levied by executives, managers, and even more experienced writers. So all a writer has to do is sprinkle in more conflict to their story, kind of like adding salt and pepper to your favorite dish, right? Wrong. The idea that sprinkling in additional conflict on top of your story makes it better is wrong on many levels. And most importantly, it incorrectly frames conflict as an additive ingredient rather than an anchor of the story's dramatic core.
The word drama is based on a Latin root dran, meaning to do. This is why drama, or dramatic writing, differs from other types of writing. Dramatic writing is not about merely conveying information like an article or a novel. Again, drama means to do, not to feel or to convey or to share. So, the to-do part of drama means the words you write are not primarily written to be an enjoyable reading experience, but rather the words are intended to be interpreted and performed, which is why most modern Hollywood shows are lacking. Many of today's movies and shows are mistakenly written for the reader's pleasure, while sacrificing dramatic space for the performer, interpreter, or the doer. But I digress. More on that topic in a later video. Back to conflict and the familiar adage that conflict is drama. In this case, drama is not meant as the genre of your story, but more broadly the art of dramatic writing itself, as in a screenplay, stage play, radio play, or dramatic podcast. It is meant to be performed. Therefore, if drama is conflict and conflict is drama, when someone tells you to add more conflict to your story, they are actually saying to add more drama to your drama. Or if you baked a cake and someone tastes it and says, you need to add more cake to your cake. Makes no sense, right? So what do people usually mean when they tell a writer their story needs more conflict? Well, for one, it usually means the reader got bored with the story. And second, it means the story does probably need more conflict. But here's where the feedback train goes off the track, and many modern Hollywood movies and shows suffer from this mistake. Conflict is not a seasoning that can be added to the story in more or less amounts. Conflict is the reason for a dramatic story to exist in the first place. Conflict has to be baked into the story at the core idea level. What often happens to newer writers is they'll write a story formatted as a script, but in actuality, at the story's basic core idea, there is not enough conflict baked in from the start. There might be an inkling of conflict, but it's not enough to sustain an entire movie or TV episode. And sadly, when it comes to dramatic writing, which is actually exploring conflict through performance, you can't just add conflict to the story after the fact and have the story be an effective piece of dramatic writing. There are different types of writers and different types of writing. Some writers naturally shy away from conflict in their writing, and many of them are fine, talented writers, but they are better suited for different types of writing rather than dramatic writing, i.e. screenwriting, stage plays, and other performance media. If conflict is drama, and dramatic writing is essentially conflict writing, and a writer's natural tendency is to go away from conflict in their work, then they're probably not well suited for dramatic writing, and there's no shame in that. But this idea that we can simply add in the conflict later is misguided and has led to poorly received movies and shows. Most Hollywood decision makers, especially non-writers, don't understand the holistic nature of good dramatic writing. And in most cases, they will instruct writers to sprinkle in more conflict after the fact, and all it does is have the effect of putting lipstick on a turd. It's not because they're unknowledgeable, but because most people haven't taken the time to study dramatic writing at a high enough level. Unfortunately, this tendency toward attempting to add in conflict to a dramatically inert story after the fact has become quite common, and we've seen lower quality content across the board. Conflict is not something you can add later like a coat of paint. Otherwise, you might end up with something questionable, like a bunch of space witches who don't know whether they're fighting or interpretive dancing. This has become common and is a poor excuse for drama and borders on comedy.
This is bad comedy.
Action without resistance grounded in narrative is simply meaningless choreography. Look at an amazing piece of dramatic writing like Breaking Bad. There are several layers of conflict. It's impossible to separate the conflict from the narrative. It's all baked in together, from the character's internal state to the external world. Conflict wasn't something added later. It was baked into the story's core premise. The entire show is an exploration of multiple levels of conflict. So, when writers receive the "it needs more conflict" notes, and we will continue to get that note often, it doesn't literally mean you should just add scenes filled with disgruntled people into your story. What it usually means is you've written an entire story based on a premise or idea that did not have adequate conflict baked into the core idea or the engine of your story. This doesn't mean you're a terrible writer. It usually means that what you wrote is not dramatic writing. You may have written something that is beautiful to read but is lacking in the dramatic doing department, which makes it dramatically inert. A dud that leaves people feeling as though it needs more conflict added to spice it up. My advice is not to rush out and add surface-level, superficial conflict, but rather to go back to your story's basic core idea and examine whether or not there is enough conflict baked into your story's initial premise. There needs to be enough to sustain the dramatic thrust throughout the whole story. Also, if you are the one giving this note to a writer, and your instincts tell you their story would benefit from more conflict, rather than taking the easy, less effective route of simply telling the writer to add or sprinkle in more conflict, instead, go back to the story's core engine and examine that to make sure adequate conflict is baked in from the beginning. Remember, conflict is drama. Therefore, dramatic writing is essentially conflict writing. In drama, conflict is not something separate from the expression that can be added in later. In good drama, conflict is the expression. Otherwise, you're writing something other than dramatic writing regardless of the page formatting. Conflict is the reason for the performance. It's not something that we can sprinkle on after the fact and have the dramatic piece work effectively.
If you would like help with your story's core conflict before you write an entire script, or if you have a script that needs more conflict and you want help fixing it at the core level, sign up for a story consult with me on Zoom. Go to StoryRay.com, choose the free option, then click on Story Development and Consulting. You can use the discount code COINED15 for 15% off for a limited time. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.